Hello everyone, welcome to your world or mine. Show you yours and I'll show you mine. And it's very interesting what's happening in my body as I have beautiful Moira here from the UK. And you'll soon see why there's a bit of a resonance here. There's something we have beyond just being in common here. And suddenly when I saw Moira, all my cells started vibrating like inside my body, literally. Because Morya, thank you for joining us and welcome to where we play here as the Joy Generation. And I think that is the thing that we have more than in common, joy. So
Yes.
would you mind to tell us a bit about your experience of joy?
Yeah, so many things are joyful. I guess joy has, for me, takes on a different meaning because many years ago now, I experienced joy that came up from the inside. And once it arrived, joy has never been the same since. So there's lots of things are joyful, laughing babies are joyful. I was watching something recently actually it was outtakes, and it was, I don't know why, but there's something about watching somebody who is trying not to laugh, but they just can't stop themselves laughing, and they're really, they're trying to make a movie or whatever it is, and they're trying not to laugh. That is, to me, so hilarious. So there's so many things that are joyful, but quite a lot of the time in the work that I do, I'm really talking about the joy of being, the joy that comes from the inside. So that for me is, I guess, what I spend most of my time. I wouldn't say the focus is on there. I was going to say focus, but that's probably the wrong word because that makes it too serious. Focus. No, I'm just letting that bubble up, just noticing that it's there. And recently I've been noticing whenever that joy is bubbling up from the inside and thinking, this is the fountain of youth for me. This is how health and well-being is turning up in my life. This is a constant source. I don't really have to be worrying about running around, or I'm getting a bit older and I'm getting to that stage where people are like, well, you've got to work on being fit and you've got to eat this and eat that, and there's lots and lots of rules and it's very serious. And I think to myself, actually, no, I think I feel that this sense of joy that's coming from the inside is actually where the real health will be coming from for me. I'm experimenting with that. We'll see.
I can so resonate with what you shared. And the very interesting thing is, while you were sharing, I was just noticing what's happening inside my body from a kinesthetic point of view. And in my heart center, it was just like, it's like when you spoke about joy of being, that it's something that comes from inside. And no matter what other people's rules are or what they talk about, it's something that bubbles up from the inside. You can't stop it once it's there. And yes, we have days that we don't feel energized and things like that, but this is not about being happy or sad or weak or strong. But I do also resonate deeply with what you shared about that you believe, or that you're experimenting with it, that this joy is coming from inside and it will affect your health. It will affect your well-being overall. And that I truly resonate with as well. When you speak about it, and even if I don't talk about my heart, yeah, it's like, I like what she's saying.
Yeah. So experiment 1 is already complete, yes, because that when you're thinking about it, you're sensing it as a really opening and exciting and expanding idea. So I guess that's your body saying, yes, experiment with that.
Yeah, my body says, I agree with that.
I agree.
Yeah.
100%.
And the other thing that's happening in my mind, I really feel it physically, is there's this curiosity, but it's an opening. It's very interesting. I feel it in my front lobes of the brain, but it's an opening. So it's curious. So it's for me as an alien on this beautiful planet, this blue planet, it's this experimentation in whatever situation. And I was very grateful that yesterday in the business world, and the last few days, I had the opportunity to do some very functional technical training with a group of young and older people, which is very interesting. And that when we played and when we use creativity to interpret all these technical, functional information, what happened to the others as well, and how they started, the younger ones, I was fascinated by them, how they just jumped out of their skins. And so when you ask them to perform something or to go and draw something on the big board or whatever, the joy bubbled up. And it was such fun, and it was very interesting because we also had people who were very structured, and they even said they need boxes, don't come with all these drawings and stuff. And us performing, we just don't do that very well. And without pressurizing them, when they realize that that actually gives them joy from inside out, which they cannot explain, they discover it has nothing to do with the left or right brain.
Cool. I've actually been teaching IT basic skills today. I'm doing something very similar. And I don't know whether they're nervous because they're very new to computing, so it makes them nervous. And I don't think they were experiencing the joy of being, but at the same time, there's other levels of joy that really help with all of these moments, aren't there? So we would do things that are just as playful as we can do it. So in the class at one point, I teach them how to use more than one finger to type with. So let's get all of these fingers going. I said, well, look, if you can use one finger of this hand and one finger of this hand, you are twice as fast. And if you can use 4 fingers, you're going to be fast. And they were all, oh, yes. It's fun, and then we just get everybody shouting out words. Okay, now type this, and try and type it fast. And so they're just playing. And before you know it, they feel a little bit more confident, sitting in front of a computer that they've never sat in front of before, with a keyboard and a mouse and all of this stuff. But now they're just playing. So they're in a completely different space with which to engage with this scary technology that they've never used before. So there's so many levels in which joy works.
You remind me now of the experience I had in my younger days when I came into the world of also IT in consulting. And I was sent on the wrong course. So they sent me to an IBM course, and it was still the green screens, and I had no idea what I was doing. I came from a commodity trading background. I cried every night because they sent me on the wrong course, administrative course. But then something very interesting happened. And I was used to work on a computer as such, but not on the green screen at the time. It was in the 1990s. And the interesting thing is that they noticed what I was doing. I would press the enter button more than once, very fast. So there was a reaction thing in this finger that somehow, I don't know, whatever I did, I always stuffed everything up because it was too quick for the computer to respond at that time. And they would always say to me, but you're breaking our computers. And then one day, the one technician said he wants to stand behind me when I'm working. He wants to see what on earth am I doing? And then he noticed it because I never noticed it myself. So it's very interesting how we also, from a kinesthetic point of view, how all our cells, everything participates, all the reflexes in our hands and everything. And I got so excited, I was just like, so when you speak now about typing with more than one finger, it reminds me of that. And yes, I can imagine if you've never touched a computer, how it feels.
Yeah. Still, they all survived.
They all survived. Yes, I also had one lady who never in the specific industry, when I was doing this training, completely new to her. The others have, some have a lot of experience, some have little, and she had nothing. So it was also very interesting to balance that situation, where somebody is a complete newbie, and the others know a bit, and the others know a lot. But it's again, when you go into the space where you go beyond the functional information and knowledge, and you go to the play part, that joy that I was speaking about earlier comes with, regardless of what you know mentally, or that you think you know, or that you think you understand. Which brings me back to the joy of being. So, where do you feel being in your body mostly? I'm just curious.
I guess, well, that sense of the joy of being just comes straight from the middle of my body. That's where I notice it most. That's where I notice it kind of bubbling up. Yeah.
Now, I believe a little birdie told me that you also have some very interesting thing called Joy Ventures. What is that about?
Joy Ventures, yes. So that is a new group that, well, let me see, when does it start? Maybe 6 months ago. And Joy Ventures is about using that sense of joy to navigate and co-create in a very different way. So Joy Ventures will range over many, many different things. So for example, we're doing our first retreat in November, and we'll be looking at celebrating the joy of being. And we're going to do a retreat in quite a different way, in the sense that it's going to be a collaborative retreat. So all of the people, it's an invitation only at this point, but all of the people coming along to that retreat will be asked to bring along a story that they love. They'll be asked to bring along a meditation or a game to share with the group, a song to share. They don't have to sing it themselves. They can just bring a recording of a song that they love, and food that they want to share. So it's very much collaborative. And what we'll be doing is, first we'll start by celebrating the joy of being, and getting into and sharing stories of that first moment where you experience that great sort of bliss that wells up from within. And we'll be sharing those transformative moments that have changed each of us forever. And then we will be sharing all of the different things that we brought along. So there's a little thread that weaves through all of the sharing. At each point, we will be gathering what I would call the power words and themes in the stories that everyone is going to bring along to this retreat. And the idea of the power words and themes is that they are phrases, they are vocabulary and ideas that we believe will be most helpful in creating a world that we all want to live in.
That's most beautiful.
So that's what we're looking for in all of these, because when you hear people's stories about how they have experienced inner joy, how they have transformed their lives, in there that's the vocabulary that we need to start gathering and using in our workplaces, in our governments, in our local governments, in our institutions, so that we can start moving our priorities to the things that really people care about. Because when you hear people talking about those transformative moments, and they might not even be around that great sort of sense of the joy of being, it might be any transformation, any personal growth that somebody has experienced, be it from some sort of trauma that they've had, that they've grown from, and they've never been the same again, or some wonderful joyful experience that has changed them forever. Whatever it is, this is the real nitty-gritty. This is the stuff we kind of wash over, and we go into the business world, into the government world, local government councillors and all of that, and we pretend that that's not important, or that's kind of personal stuff. No, this is the important stuff. This is the stuff people really care about. And we haven't weaved it into our local governments and our national governments and our global governments. And this is one of the big themes for me at the moment, is how are we going to bring ourselves together as a globe, because we really need to now. We need to find some way of sharing this beautiful planet and all of the resources in a way that feels joyful and great for everyone, and not fearful, because there's some people who don't have enough and some people who have so much they're just wasting. They're throwing stuff away all the time and wasting it. So there's all of those things that have a huge potential to create a more beautiful world. And so that's part of the retreat, is to try and gather those ideas and the vocabulary that goes along with it, because the words that we use are so powerful. So that is just a little sample of one of the things that the Joy Venture group will be doing, amongst many, many other things. But we're experimenters. We're not people who are going out to tell others what they should do in life, or how they should change, or train people, or any of that sort of thing. We're really going out to experiment and learn, and invite everybody to share what they already know. And today, even though I was doing something very different, the IT training, what really struck me was, in the class there were people who were much more experienced and people who were complete beginners. And what was so beautiful to see was there was 10 people, there was only one trainer, that was me. And it's impossible to get around everyone, but the people with more experience were just naturally, without being asked, without feeling imposed upon, there was a joy for them to be able to go and help the person who was less experienced. And this is what humans do. And when you look at the news, you can come away, or social media, you can come away thinking, humans do all this dreadful stuff all the time. But many, many more times, humans do beautiful things. And it's a natural giving, and it's not counting, it's not fearful of sharing too much or not sharing too much. It's just natural. Most people know how to do it, and then we pretend we can't, and we have to write all the rules and get our guns out and all of that. So thank you for asking me about Joy Ventures. It's a very exciting, as you can tell, I'm very excited about it, and I really think we're going to do some fun and interesting things, and I'm sure as it goes it will expand and expand.
So may I ask where you are having it? Where are you hosting it? In the UK?
So the first retreat is going to be in the UK, and as I say, that one's invitation only. So we're going to be working with a few people that we know, and developing the exercises into something that can be done on a larger scale. And I feel like it's the kind of retreat that we might be able to maybe create a framework for anybody else anywhere around the world to run the same retreat, so that we can gather all of these phrases and all of these experiences from all around the world. So I hope that maybe that's something we can experiment with too.
You'll see later how much not only resonance, alignment, coherence, and all those beautiful things there is in this, what you're doing and what we're doing, and the joy generation and the joy rendezvous, just with younger people. Not that there's age involved in anything, but it's just very interesting how I've just spoken about that with a dear friend recently as well. That suddenly it seems that we become aware of it, not that these things were not happening, but we suddenly, through synchronicity and serendipity, become aware of things that we do, that others do as well, just in a different way perhaps. But suddenly we become aware of it. It's like at the same time in the world, in different places in the world, which I also found fascinating, and that it's not competition, it's maybe different ways we do things and we put it all together maybe differently, but it has the same intentions, and there's so much that's the same about it, which makes me excited. Because I think in a world of, especially when you speak now about the business world and governments and the likes, the competition thing of, I'm always fascinated when people talk about themselves as futurists and then they're so competitive. And it seems like we still get stuck in the ways from the past. Not that we're saying anything specifically bad or something is good or better, but it's just very interesting that we talk about collaboration in the future. And then in the now, there's still this big competition. I'll take something from you, which I want to take back to something that you shared earlier about the sharing part. That people just share, and there's always enough to share. And I always receive in the same part. And I think sometimes we forget as humans that now with technology and the internet and communications, we receive so much free information, not that it has a meaning necessarily for us yet, but so much free information. So how can we ever feel to go into scarcity mode? Because we just continuously receive. So sharing then, that flow, that creative flow that comes from the sharing, it comes back to us in some way. It might not be a direct like in the past, where if I wanted to buy this, I had to pay you for it. But now I receive so many other things for free that I cannot put a price on. It's impossible to put a price on all information that we now receive free on the internet, for example. But now it's to give meaning to that the value comes into and to discern what should we take for now and what should we leave for later and what should we completely discard in this moment in time. But it's fascinating that the world is moving to the sharing economy, the way, just the philosophy of life versus a give and take, which is wonderful. And I think that's part of the joy of being that you're speaking about. Because for me, joy of being is there's always plenty. There's no such thing as scarcity. Because this joy that bubbles from the inside out, there's no, you can't close the tap. It's there continuously, no matter what's going on in the outside world. It's our perception of what's going on in the outside world and how we get attached to specific scenarios. And that, I think, the more we begin to experience, like you say, this inner joy from inside, the more we will be able to manifest in the world the balance between, you spoke about earlier about people don't have enough and people have too many and then waste. Because in such a state, you become more aware of what's going on around you. So you begin to live with more awareness. And your choices become with more awareness. I don't know how you experience it, but that's how I experience it. So that even then when you're between others, you don't feel the same, or who don't experience it yet themselves. It's almost like it's contagious. And sometimes those people can't really mentally define it, but something begins to happen with them. And if only we can stay curious and open to ask what's going on here, what's happening here, what's it trying to show me?
Yeah, I think what you said about you can't, that joy from the inside is you can't turn it off. There's no shortage of it. And that type of joy is something that I think affords a lot of freedom, because once you have that type of joy, you don't need to rush around looking for the external joy. Yes, ice cream is nice, but if you don't have ice cream, you still have joy. And all of the things that can make life very stressful for people, looking for recognition through the things that they own or the things they've achieved, that's like a sort of hamster wheel of joy. You have to keep refilling that, have to go and refill that all the time in order to keep receiving that type of kind of low-level joy, if you will. but the joy from within is just abundant and never ending. It never needs refilling. It's always there. You don't have to be worthy. You don't have to accomplish things. It's just there. It's free for everyone. And once you have that, the idea of sharing, that idea of abundance just feels much easier. You're never worried that there won't be enough joy for you, because there's so much, like a flowing river. So I think it's, for me, it really makes life a lot easier to spend a certain amount of time each day just sort of tapping into that sense of inner joy, or the joy of being, because once I'm there, all the other things that might worry me or concern me are just float away. So it makes me an easier person to be with.
I love what you're sharing there, because for me as well, in my experience, it's when you say the other things, they just float away. It's fascinating how that happens, because it seems like there's somehow invisible connection between where we put our attention, and also the way we perceive things, whatever it might be, how we perceive that to be, and this inner joy that comes from the inside out. That once that starts flowing, all those perceptions sorts of start to fade away. And whatever it was that made us being concerned or worried, or whatever it might be, suddenly changed form. If we don't look at it anymore as a worry, and we are able to deal with it much better as well, because we don't have that mental attachment to it that makes us worry about it, or makes us emotionally disturbed about it. So there's a lot of power in this joy that we are speaking about now. And as we're speaking about it, especially when you speak about it, it's also interesting. Now where I feel it down my body, I now feel it in my throat. So it goes back to speaking your truth for me, which is then speaking the joy language, which I love how you shared about the new vocabulary. Because there's a lot of beautiful people around the world who's doing amazing things, but we fall back into the old vocabulary.
Yes.
And we speak things into being, and we don't realize that.
I think that's very true. And what you were talking about earlier in terms of lots of people around the world doing similar things. So the vocabulary, I hope, is a way to really connect them, in the sense that if we all start using the same vocabulary, not because we have to use a particular word, but because by using the same vocabulary, we can easily identify and join with those who are on the same mission to create a more beautiful world. And we can use those terms and really create a shared knowing around how we can move forward, the first small step each of us can take. And hopefully that shared vocabulary will allow us to very, very quickly see that, yes, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same, we are the same, and we are facing the same issues no matter where we are. And also it gives us a good place to start creating solutions for some of the global issues that we have. So I do think the vocabulary is really powerful. It always reminds me, I don't know if you've had this experience, but if you see a word for the first time, I remember seeing this word, I've never heard it, and it's not a very useful word, but it's a lovely word, susurration. So susurration is the very small sound, just in case somebody is watching and doesn't know what it is, that it's a sort of onomatopoeic word. It sounds like what it is, so that the small sound of sand crossing over sand, that's a susurration. And I remember seeing that word for the first time thinking, well, that's a nice word. And then again, next day I see the same word. It's like you never see it, and as soon as you see it once, you keep seeing it all over the place, which I always think is an amazing thing. So I'm hoping with this vocabulary these power ideas, these power words that we can all start using to create a more beautiful world, that we will start going, ah, yes, there's somebody doing that in Zambia, there's somebody doing that in Cornwall, there's somebody doing that in Washington, DC. And we can connect up those words, because those words will be touch points to remind us that actually we're not alone, and we're all, there's so many, even though the news and the media might be making us think that there are so many people who are not attempting to create a more beautiful world that we'll all love to live in. There are actually many more people. But it's fine, because, you know, sometimes we have to do things a little bit behind the scenes until we're really ready. But I think that we're really ready now. So I'm very excited about the years to come, because I think all of these people around the world have been doing beautiful things. We're all going to be connecting up and sharing what we know, and then the acceleration will be amazing. It'll be done in a moment. So often when I talk to people who are trying to create change, activists, or people who are really tackling the big, difficult problems of global governance or whatever it might be, there's a sense of kind of exhaustion, and there's a sense of, well, we'll never be able to do it because you can't get those people over there. They will always do what they've always done, and you just can't persuade them. It's exhausting, and we're trying so hard to get them to do something different. And very often there's that sense of just overwhelm and exhaustion. But I think that will go very quickly once we start moving, and we realize that actually so many people who are already really working very hard to create the more beautiful world that so many of us want. We all want. I don't want to say so many of us, we all want that. Even people who don't seem like they want it, they do. They just have a different vision of what it looks like. So yeah, we got a lot of joy coming in our direction. And it can be a difficult thing to talk to people about, because some people that I talk to about joy or inner joy or any of the many levels of joy that we can experience as humans, so, but look at the news, people are having such a terrible time, how can you talk about joy? Well, I think in a way we have to, because just solving the problems is not enough. We need to reach for thriving, flourishing, not just getting by, not just surviving. If we have a goal that's just surviving, that's a very mean goal, that's a very small goal. We have to reach for a world that's flourishing. So, but it is a difficult one sometimes. Do you find it? Because I know that you talk about joy a lot.
I feel joy a lot. I talk about it as well. But, you know, actually speaking, what came up for me was, and I'm grateful you shared the word persuasion earlier as you were speaking now, with the activists, the beautiful people. And in the country that I live, which is my own country, we have been through many, many interesting things in the past 3, 4, 5 decades. But what that did for us was to show, and at least for me, and I know there's a lot of people who feel similar, not just think similar, but feel similar, is that activists have to come up when something happens in the world that's maybe against human rights or against overusing just consuming our natural resources, or whatever it might be, whether it's greed or power, whatever it might be, is that when something doesn't go well, there were people who had to come up to the fore to be the voice, to be the activists, to share that what's being done is not good anymore. We won't stand for it any longer. And when you use the word persuasion, for me, I felt directly what I experienced here as well, is that that had to happen. There was a place for that in the world at the specific time in our history and her story, that people had to begin to speak up. And I know there's a wise man who spoke about the camel that's asleep, and then the lion comes and roars, oh, and then the child comes to play. And I think that's where we are now with the joy thing. The activists, they were the lions. They had to come up and wake everybody up and say, this is no longer good, we won't stand for it. But now it takes a completely different thing for us to go to that next level, which is the playful child, which now creates, because a child is so creative. They're so full of wonder and awe. They see the beauty in life where others won't see it, where others will see the dreadful things happening. And as humans, we cannot put our attention to two things at the same time. It's impossible if we want to do it properly. So if we focus on that one part, which is still the roaring lion, which is needed, and there's a lot of people, like you say, they're tired. You speak to them, they're really hopeless because they don't feel they make any progress because they need to persuade people. But the child just go and do what he does. He creates something new out of the clay. He's not trying to copy something that's already there on the shelf. He uses his imagination, he starts making something new. So he focuses on something very different. But not to say that those people didn't have their place in the world. And I think at the time, in the late 20th century, that was necessary to come up. Mm-hmm. And now I think we're really in a big transition process between this roaring lion that had to bring up the voice for the people, that we can now go to that inner child can come to play and to create something new together, which is something very different than fighting an old system or trying to convince people of something. Yeah. And it's through creativity that I truly believe, and I saw it in my own professional life, in the workplace, in the business world before as well. Once you make people start playing, all that dreadful stuff sort of disappear and they become so creative. And yes, initially they find they're out of their comfort zones, they feel resistance, but once they begin to feel what it feels like in their bodies as well, it's unstoppable. They want more of it. But all I'm saying with this is that what you were sharing about as well is that there's a lot of very tired people because they've been really being this lion and the lion is tired now.
Yes.
And now another group of people had to come forward to support them, but not in supporting what they do, but to share a new possibility.
Yeah.
And how we can do things in a different way. And I think that's where this magical, I don't want to call it a thing because it's not a thing. I don't even have vocabulary for it yet. This impulse, this surge from inside, that inner joy, once you experience that physically yourself, it's not something you talk about because you cannot really define it. And I believe everybody experiences it very differently. We all put together very differently in the way we sense our worlds through our senses, inner and outer. But once you experience it physically yourself, in whatever way,
mm-hmm.
then only will you realize what we're speaking about today, because otherwise it will be a mental concept that's very difficult to even construct. It's not a model of understanding. It's rather a model of feeling and of knowing inside. You see, inner knowing. And I get it a lot that people tell me, but that's not the real world. But what world are you speaking about? Because there's the world collectively, and then there's each of us, more than 8 billion people's personal experiences of that world. So we actually have more than 8 billion versions of it. And I don't believe two people have the same version, not exactly the same. Similar, but not exactly the same.
Yeah.
And when we then say, but that world's not real, it's not true, because the more we come together then, like you share as well, and start to create this beautiful, co-create this beautiful vocabulary, I also believe there will be wonderful things happening. But you know what I want to share with you that's so interesting, because it really hooks onto what you shared about this new vocabulary. Now, with this beautiful play that we have today, we've been doing it with a lot of interesting people from all over the world. And at the end of the process, we don't record it, but we share it. everybody shares a word, what it was for them about, and then a symbol to that. And with the words, we're also speaking a new world into being, which we don't know the narrative yet because we continue this process till the end of next year. And through the symbols, we co-create a whole new world picture through the symbols. But the fascinating part for me now, as the alien, is so interesting what's happening. The word that people chose, or that came for them, up for them, I only have to think about that word, and immediately the connection that was created through this playful process between us comes into my physical experience straight away. I feel it in my whole body because it's all very different. So somebody's word might have been grace. And then when I now speak about grace, this man is standing literally in front of me. It's like he's aware of what we're sharing now, which he most probably is on a subconscious level. But that for me was fascinating to begin to realize what's really happening on an energetic level. So I'm really curious as well, because in your case, with what you are sharing with your retreat in November, I really have no words to explain what is happening in my being as you speak about. Because the power of that vocabulary, especially in such a close-knit environment then, the energy is... So I'm really excited about that, because that's...
You have some good words to share.
And I think for me, what I feel now is also, especially my arms as well. You know, my arms for me personally is our instruments of our hearts and our souls and our minds, everything, our hands and our arms. They do stuff for our hearts and our souls and our minds. So when this starts happening in my body, I always have this feeling of, I just see like thousands of people reaching out like this with their arms. And the energy is just running from me to you, like from this side to the body to that side, out to the other person. It's just yummy.
Wow.
And I think that will heal the soul of the world. It's like you say, everybody, whether they understand it or realize it or are aware of it, they want this joy deep inside. And I've experienced that in the business world as well. In the past, when I was still really involved in the business world, doing workshops and sort of interesting things with people in different contexts, was that I put them through a little creative process. It was very playful. And through the process, they realized they all want the same. And there's exactly the thing we are speaking about now. And the moment they realize it, people who used to be in conflict suddenly realize, but that person wants exactly the same as I, maybe in a different format or in a different configuration or shape. But it's in essence the same thing, because when you bring them back deeper and deeper to themselves, what is it that thing makes you feel? They realize they all want the same thing. And then suddenly there's resonance within the bigger group. Now I'm not talking about in the heart of the business world. So it's not separating things. I think when we start to separate things, like in silos, a lot of this dissonance happened. Because the fragmentation was just so big.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, what's one of the things really that's interesting about organizations is that the way we try and get things done inside a small organization, and then a bigger organization, and then a big corporation, and then a global organization, these are mirrors of the same processes. So if we learn how to do it in the smaller sense, then we can move it up to the larger organization, and then to organizing things globally, which is the next step for us. It's the next exciting, expanding playing field, is to be able to create globally together something more beautiful, and really recognize it's what's amazing to me at the moment, as I'm working out new experiments and exercises to work with people in lots of different ways and use the power vocabulary, is that right now there's 2 documentaries on the BBC about ritual, and they're showing rituals around the world and how rituals bring people together and support them to express and manage emotion around birth and death and marriage and all the big milestones in life. And I think, wow, how amazing that those are on right now, because I need to know that. Also, how amazing that these things are already there. We already have the kind of infrastructure that will allow us to really engage with this stuff that matters, our emotional lives. Not that I don't want to put emotions on a pedestal, because of course they're here and then they're gone. We have to manage them in a way that's useful and purposeful, not become slaves to our emotions. And I think sometimes, just to digress a little bit, when people hear talking about joy, they're all like, well, that's just an emotion, it's here to go. But what we're really talking about, and I really appreciate the fact that you described that in some detail, is that when somebody says to you, that joy, that inner joy, or that joy of being that bubbles up from inside, and it's got no external source. It's not because something great's happened. It's just there. And if you've experienced that, physically experienced that, then you can hear that and go, oh yeah, I know what you mean. But if you haven't, it's a complete mystery. It's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, lady. That doesn't make any sense to me. There's just joy when I get a pay rise. There's joy when I eat ice cream. There's pizza joy. There's, that's where joy is. But so I think I really appreciate the fact that you really pulled that out, and also really acknowledged that unless you physically experienced it, don't worry that you're wondering what the conversation is about, because yes, it's not really something that you can think your way into. You just can't. You have to experience it. So people say to me, oh, that's just joy, or that's just, some spirituality thing, and it doesn't really make any sense to me. And I said, well, that's up to you, but you have to experience it. Before you can tell me that doesn't exist, you have to actually step into the possibility of experiencing that before you tell me that there is no such thing.
Exactly.
So I think it's very good. I appreciate the fact that you acknowledge that it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to talk about, because unless you've experienced it, you just think everyone's a nutter.
How can you be happy? Look at what's going on around you, like that type of thing. But it takes me to the word happiness, and I hear it a lot from a vocabulary point of view. And maybe we need a new word for joy, but joy itself is just such a gorgeous word for me personally. Even if I just go into the vibration of the word, of the energy behind the word, happiness and sadness goes more together with me. For example, happiness is maybe something like you said, it's an ice cream, or somebody brushes my head or touch me, makes me feel good, whatever it might be. We're not talking about something that's coming from the external onto you, or that's created by the external, like you explained as well. And for me, sometimes, this is a very simple thing I do sometimes, is rubbing the hands, because we've got more nervous points in our hands than any other organ in our body. And by rubbing our hands and creating warmth, and then closing our eyes, just that we're not distracted from an external point of view, but it also calms down our nervous system straight away and creates a bridge between our left and right brains. By closing our eyes down while we do this, and we put our hand on our physical heart where we can feel our heartbeat, sometimes people begin to feel this joy from inside, because they never connected. I hear a lot of people say, but I can't feel my own heartbeat. And then so I would say, but that's impossible. How can't you? But I know it's real for them. But the more they say them, when they do just a simple thing of feeling, realizing cognitively, not only kinesthetically and somatically, that there's this warmth in their hands. And then when you ask them, where does it come from? From who's creating it? You. Does it come from the outside? No. And that's the closest then for them to explain what true joy is really about, this inner joy that we are speaking about. Because it's you create, it's coming from the inside out. It's not through something that happens externally, because I can create this warmth between my hands wherever I am. So whether I'm in the middle of Afghanistan or wherever it is, or in Somalia, I can do this and feel this warmth and remember that I'm creating this warmth. It's from the inside out, not something externally inducing it and creating it. So that doesn't matter where I am, this recognition. And suddenly as I'm speaking about it now, my whole heart space opens up as well, my body, my cells responds to it. It's a simple thing as that that can make us realize, have us a little bit of an understanding of what we are speaking about. And the other thing that I would like to, as you're speaking about this now as well, to maybe just share is in terms of this joy of being. You know, in older times, like in the 20th century, from a personal development point of view and a spiritual growth point of view, people, you know, we had to do lots of stuff. Long pilgrimages, long journeys to work on ourselves. We live at a time now where instantaneously our body can come into harmony, into balance, our energetic system. We can work because we become aware, we are aware of more knowledge and wisdom about ourselves and our own total being. So even in terms of our emotional well-being and our mental well-being, we don't have to work like for 3 years on ourselves anymore, 10 years like in the past. So when people ask me, but how do I generate this from inside? How does this happen? Then they think they also have to go through this long journey, and it's no longer necessary. We have become to know and to experience, like you say, with experimentation, in very simple ways that it can be ignited from the inside out, without necessarily having the need to define it mentally or cognitively. And I think in the past where we come from, it's not to say that that was bad, it was just we had to go through that as human beings. But we no longer need to do that.
Yeah.
It's now from a physical point of view, it's a kinesthetic thing, it's a somatic thing, it's in our cells, it's in our body. Or whatever way we experience it, it's no longer this dreadful mountain that we have to climb to be able to experience it. It's available to everybody, and it doesn't take so much like we had to, that we believed in the past we had to do to get to a certain state of being. It's a state of being, it's not an emotion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I really agree with that. I came across a word a while ago, because you know I love a power word. And instead of enlightenment or, yes, maybe that word's a good one to use. Instead of that, the word was realize, to be realized. And that really resonated with me, because the teaching around that is that you are all of those things already. It's just a matter of realizing it. All you have to do is remove the things that are in the way for that realization to happen. So in lots of ways, it's to just stop thinking for a while. We'll do it. Stop thinking for a while will really help. But I really love that exercise you just showed me, and it's really well timed, because next week I'm going to be teaching a class on anxiety management, and I think that rubbing hands together will be really a wonderful. I have different exercises, but lots of them are quite, breath oriented. But to have a physical one where they're moving hands together, that's such a simple thing. And you could do it anywhere. You could be in a supermarket and you could just, no one would be like stopping you saying, hey lady, what are you doing?
What are you doing?
Would not, nobody would comment on it. So I really thank you for that. Going
You're
to
most
be
welcome.
wonderful next week to introduce them to that.
You're most welcome. I've done it also in a conference where I was facilitating the conference, a very technical conference in the beginning, the first day. And some of the people came to me afterwards. They said, I don't know what you've done with us, but that you're asking us in the beginning to rub our hands, to close our eyes, to put our hands on our hearts. It made us feel so good. And it changed our whole experience. So there's no logic to it. We can't define why it's happening. But for me personally speaking, just for myself, it's whenever I'm in a chaotic situation or whatever happens around me that takes me a little bit of balance, or where I react to something, whatever it might be. When I do that, I come back to myself immediately. It's very interesting in my personal experience how I just come back to myself just for that moment. And suddenly, whatever happened has no longer the charge, the emotional charge or the mental charge to it. And my body is also a lot more flexible then and softer and going with the flow than trying to resist. But so we can do it anyway. And the fascinating part that I've found in the business world is that people are not resistant to it. Because it's such a simple thing.
Yeah.
It's not that you're asking them now to do something spiritual that they're not used to. Because this is not spiritual, this is physical.
Yes. No lotus position required.
Yeah, no, and not crush your arms or legs like that or anything like that. It's very simple. It's a body thing. It's not even, there's not really a lot of mind involved there. Yeah, and then if we do resist, to just shake our heads very fast, suddenly that thought that connected us to the resistance disappears as well when we shake our heads. It's very interesting. You can't think when you shake your head. It's impossible.
Yes. Or you do this. I did emotional freedom technique.
Yeah.
And if you do this, you can't think about anything.
You can't.
But I like that movement of no. So if a thought comes in, go no, because that's so hardwired. Except for I discovered the other day that in Bulgaria they go yes.
Oh, in Spain as well.
And they go no. No, yeah, no, which is the opposite. So that would be like, oh,
I saw that in Spain as well.
Myself over getting that right.
I saw that in Spain as well. I was the first time I was in Spain. I was so fascinated because I'm also very tuned with this vocabulary thing that you're speaking about. Me and my daughter even discussed it today. That I have this thing with the vibration of words and the vocabulary. But in Spain, I also found it fascinating because the affirmation is no. So if somebody wants to know, do you want to do it? Do you want to go with me? No. And then they shake their head like this. And my mind can't understand that. There's something wrong here. You're asking no, but you want to know yes. How is that? So it's very interesting then when we do go into, but this simply is not necessarily no, it's just to shake your head, that the minds, that your neuropaths, there's some shaking in there, shaking and stirring. In that second, when that level of attention is broken, then the charge from an energetic point of view of that mental thought disappears. And you have to think, what did I think? Because that link is gone.
All right, good. I'll remember that as well.
And in the business world, if people, and I found in the business world as well, initially when you ask them to shake their heads and think, are you crazy? We will look stupid. And then once they do it, they say, but actually this feels very good, especially if you had a headache. It's incredible if you have a headache to do this as well. It begins to disappear. So that's, and then the joy can come through, because if you don't feel well physically, it's hard to allow this joy to come out because our physical system is not in balance. But it's wonderful. I really am excited about what you shared. I'm curious about also not to see what's going to happen with your retreat, but I feel just this belief of mine that knowing actually through experience that when we do things like that together, even with a small group of people, we create an energy print into this world into the physical. And the more people then experience, like you say, it can be duplicated everywhere and repeated everywhere in the world. And the more people then start using those words, the more that energetic imprint is strengthened. And it's then, when that becomes strengthened, then it becomes, like you say, a power word, a power phrase, a power narrative. We have so many power narratives in this world anyway, no matter what, why they were created in the beginning in the first place. But we have lots of them anyway that we use daily without realizing the power behind them. Yes. So I'm really fascinated to see, especially from your experience, and then see if our journey starts merging with your journeys, what's going to happen. I think it's going to be awesome.
I think so. And I think also a lot of the exciting work is going to be around creating new stories. So a lot of our folk stories, a lot of our ancient stories are really old, and it's time to write new ones. And the next workshop that I'll be working on, and I've started working on already, is creating new stories with very young people, because for them it's so easy to play. We're going to do that with adults as well, but yeah, to start creating some new stories instead of, even with small children now in the UK, you buy a fairy story book and you read them the same stories, and all of them are allegories about how life is. So we're teaching them through the stories how life is. Well, let's make sure we've got good stories that match where we are, because we're not in the same place. As you mentioned earlier, we're not in the same place. We don't have to go and meditate on a mountain for 2 years to realize what we are. Not who we are, but what we are. And that's the bigger question. Who we are falls away when we discover what we are, because we kind of don't need it. Sometimes when people ask me to, who I am, and just say a little bit about yourself, in the right company, you would be the right company. I say, well, I look like a middle-aged English woman, but I'm not that. I'm not that. I'm something very different. So that's part of my joy journey, to not be that, to live from my core. And I use core because it's a more neutral word than some of the other words that, might be more familiar to people. But I think for me, part of the work is to strip out some of the old stories, some of the old stories around spirituality and all of the rules that those come with. Because if you really dig into some of the masters, they will say that all of those things aren't important, that the rules were provided to support people when they needed those rules to help them along the way. But now we must get to the time when we're going to write our own rules about how reality will work. Now that's really exciting.
I also believe that. Morya, I'm really grateful that you joined us today. And now my body is really rejoicing, especially now my head. it's all over my face and my hairline. Can others contact you afterwards? Can we share your details with them if they're interested in your workshops, to hear more about Joy Ventures and everything else you do?
That would be great. That would be great.
So we will share it at the end of the podcast with everybody and the video cast. And everyone, if you're curious about the joy of being, here's one of the beautiful ladies to contact. And stay curious and wonder, be in wonder. It's when we are open to what else is possible that we can see different possibilities. If we're just stuck in something, it's impossible to see other possibilities. So it's through curiosity and through being open to joy and playfulness. And playfulness doesn't mean we're silly. I heard this at the other day as well, that somebody was referring to being playful as silly. It's not the playfulness we're speaking about is not the same. It's taking away that seriousness. And it's not to say that something's not important either. It's simply, it's the way how we approach life and how we respond to life. And yeah, I feel my whole body now again. So thank you so much, Morya, and everybody. I would like to invite you to listen and watch this video cast, or if you listen to the audio cast, more than once. And just notice with your attention on the vocabulary and what it does to you as a person, whether it's your body, whether it's an emotion that come up, maybe you see something, we always react differently with our senses. But just notice, maybe just lie in the bed once and just listen to our voices without looking at us on a video, for example. And just notice what happens in your body when you hear certain words. Because that already starts to trigger us then to become curious about that specific word or something we shared about and experience. And that's the whole idea about this as well, is that we stimulate each other, we trigger each other, we ignite things in each other, and we strengthen things in each other, and we enrich ourselves through the process. So we're not trying to teach you anything. That's not what this is about. It is to invite you to come and join some of our experiences as well, that you can see for yourself. There's no rules of in this type of work, because it's something that comes from within, which is impossible to put a boundary around that. So thank you, Morya. We're really grateful that you've been with us and that you shared your wisdom with us today and all the beautiful things that you're busy involved in. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. It was very kind of you and a great joy to chat with you.
Thank you.